Welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our Voice of the Retail Revolution webinar event. Today's topic is sustainability and luxury retail, opponents or allies. I got a sneak peek of our audience who has dialed in, and I wanted to say a special greeting to many of our retailer and brand partners who are on. Some of you are in LA, many of you have joined in from New York or Florida, and we even have some that have joined in from Europe. I am Kirsten Lee, Senior Vice President of Luxury Leasing at Brookfield Properties. We recently launched the Iconic Collection, a curated portfolio of our best shopping centers, which are home to many of our most forward-thinking luxury brands. And to launch the Iconic Collection, we partnered with industry revolutionaries to tell the stories of our centers through their lens. I am thrilled that one of these revolutionaries is here with us today, Stephanie Benedetto, CEO and founder of Queen of Raw. Stephanie and her company are tackling the world's clean water crisis by turning pollution into profit through her online marketplace that sells dead stock fabric to designers across some of the biggest brands in the industry. First of all, hi, Stephanie.
How are you? So glad to be here with everybody.
We're glad you're here too. To set up the conversation for our audience, I wanted to give a little background. In a recent U.S. consumer survey, 66% of consumers surveyed consider the use of sustainable materials to be a very important purchasing factor. The survey was conducted during COVID-19, and that was a time where consumers and brands were really pushing to reevaluate their priorities, their impact on the world. You know, consumers really want fashion players to act responsibly, consider the social and environmental impact of their businesses. And brands obviously want to make financially smart decisions that will bring meaning to their shoppers. Luxury giants like LVMH or Kering and Tapestry were actually some of the earliest adopters to this, and many of them have published long view plans for sustainability, well before the pandemic began. So in fact, despite our little bit of a clickbait headline, the luxury industry has and continues to play a very huge role in the quest for sustainable fashion. And, some may think of luxury and sustainability as opposing terms, but today we're going to explore just how in sync these two places really are. So today we're going to cover topics of sustainability, the store as storyteller. We'll even touch on environmental design and blockchain technology, something that many people are talking about. So for the audience out there, be sure to drop your questions in the Q&A throughout the discussion. If you have any, we will answer questions live at the end of the event. So let's start. So Stephanie, tell us about your company, the Queen of Raw, and what inspired it, and how did this all begin?
Well, thank you for so much for having me and for this incredible conversation. Thank you all for joining us at home and around the world. To kind of frame the conversation, I wanted to have a big and a bold mission and vision in who I am and what I do. So I am literally on a mission to solve the world's water crisis. And my focus is obviously textiles and fashion, why we're all here, which by many accounts is actually the second biggest polluter in the world of clean water globally. If we continue at the current pace of textile production, by 2025, 2/3 of the entire world's population will face shortages of fresh water and be exposed to hazardous chemicals from textile production alone. And I mention that because it is important to see this is not 100 years from now, this is not 50 years from now, this is today, and this is on our shores. And that also means, though, that fashion has the power to solve the world's water crisis. And that's what we're really excited to chat about today. So for my company and our focus, we looked at waste, because waste, unused textiles, unused finished goods, this stuff is bad for people and planet, but it's also really bad for a business's profit. Little known fact, but every single year, $120 billion worth of unused textiles just sit in warehouses collecting dust or being burned or sent to landfill. And I'm sure for any of you out there thinking about your business, right, this supply chain waste, dead stock textiles and finished goods it matters now more than ever, right? Through the pandemic, we're obviously experiencing a crisis of supply, more unused inventory than ever before because of all those closed stores, canceled orders, right? Returns and missed seasons and collections. And I like to say at that volume, waste is not just environmentally irresponsible for you and your businesses. This is a CFO issue. Yeah. And that's the kind of the big picture vision of what my company, Queen of Raw, is here to address. We built to solve the problem a global marketplace with AI-powered supply chain software. So enterprise organizations can buy and sell their unused waste, but also, most importantly, manage and mitigate and minimize this waste going forward. And just a quick little background on who I am and why I do what I do. I kind of got keyed into this problem early on because my family has been in fashion and textiles for over 100 years. In New York, if the accent doesn't give it away, although I swear I don't have one. In 1896, my great-grandfather actually came over on a ship from Austria. He landed at Ellis Island, and he settled into the Lower East Side of New York, which was the original garment district. And he was an immigrant chasing the American dream. And he had to make a living for his family. So what did he do? He found materials and supplies nearby, old fabrics and furs and things immigrants had brought over on the ships with them, but they weren't using anymore. And he would repurpose them by hand using minimal waste and minimal toxins into beautiful fashion garments because his bottom dollar depended on it. And he sold to local customers. And it was an incredibly profitable, successful business. Now, of course, we all know today's supply chains are much more complicated than the way my great-grandfather did business. But our vision is, how can we use technology to get back to the way he did business? And I'm doing this for my children. I want them to have clean water to drink, clothes that aren't toxic to wear, and a planet to live on. So excited to dive deeper into it, but that's a little about why I do what I do.
I love your background story. I think it's such a, testament to the power of New York and, the whole retail and garment business. I think, it's not surprising that your family background would have come from that space. I was thinking about your company when we were talking last week, that really you're a technology company at the end of the day. And I think when you think about textiles or dead stock repurposing, people think of like maybe fashion design, but really at the end of the day, this technology that you've developed is sort of your standout piece.
Yeah, it is. But of course, we are selling technology to fashion, which historically has not been, it's such a powerful industry, but not as technologically advanced, but in that huge opportunity, especially with what we're going through right now for digital innovation, especially for enterprise, the opportunity is now. But yeah, at our core, we are selling technology to solve these problems.
Brookfield is also a B2B company similar to yours, and the common denominator between our two companies would be the brands that we each work with. Who do you qualify as a standout brand partner of yours, and why?
It's a great question. And to kind of frame it, I wanted to obviously address, there's this question, right? We're hearing this S word, sustainability, which means so many things to so many people. And that is part of the challenge. It is a heavy loaded word. But for any definition of the word, there's a question. Are enterprise organizations actually doing this? And what's really cool, and you kind of mentioned some of them already in your introduction, right, is that brands across industries and around the world are doing this. They have taken action and signed commitments to reduce their waste, many by 2025 or 2030. And I think what's particularly interesting about the fact that the LVMHs and the Kerings, right, and the Tapestries are doing is that they are putting a stake in the ground as to what they stand for, what they believe as a company, and where the world is going. What's also interesting is that if you don't start to take these actions and think about these things, you could face exposure to significant liability with all the recent changes in the laws, recycling laws, EPR policies, right? Tariffs, trade wars. if you don't think about sustainability and waste reduction. So a great example of who is doing awesome work, I think, is Nike. They, by McKinsey's latest reports, I think dominated in value creation through the pandemic. And a big part of why they do what they do is around sustainability. And they have a lot of different applications of how they're doing sustainability. But one cool example that did really well is they just did a collection out of dead stock called Space Hippie. And this collection did really well. And so I think it just shows as one example, but there are so many more of who are doing awesome things and how it really is having an impact. And also, most importantly, and we'll talk about it later, helping their bottom and their top lines. But, at the end of the day, I think that any definition of sustainability has to make sense for people, for planet, for profit. And it does mean that everyone out there, from fast fashion to, of course, luxury haute couture, needs to be able to participate and be a part of the solution. And what's cool about luxury, obviously, is that this inventory and these materials and their journey and their story are so important and valuable to why luxury is luxury, right? And how valuable the materials and the products actually are. And I think starting to think about sustainability and taking action today helps luxury prepare itself for the supply chain of the future. And I think it truly is going to be one that is more on demand, more local, and more sustainable. But to get there, right, is not an easy task. Where do you go and what do you do on day one? And that's where some, finding partners and collaborators and startups building technology solutions, right? I think that can really only help amplify your brand's mission and vision and the direction you're going in, for sure. We were really excited at Queen of Raw to develop early on some very cool collaborations and partnerships. We do work with the United Nations, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, with MIT, even with big software companies like SAP. And we did all that to try to make it quick and easy and efficient for the biggest companies in the world with the most complex supply chains to be able to adopt our innovation and our technology solution. And I think in turn, it really builds trustworthiness as to your sustainability journey when you build that community, and obviously when your partners and customers communicate good things about you. So yeah, I think there's so many good examples that are coming and that are here about how people are doing this. And there definitely is an entry point for you and your business to be able to start and do this today.
Well, I think the sustainability message is such an important one for really all consumers, but particularly younger consumers. Yes. It is as important to them as just, clean air or oxygen that we breathe and water. So it's something that I think all brands, luxury and otherwise, are recognizing is a major must do in order to be relevant to consumers going forward.
You're so right. And the millennials and Gen Zs, they are acting with their dollars. And by some accounts, they have the most purchasing power of anyone on the planet, right? So we need to be listening to them. And these things matter. One interesting thing, if you're looking at how to start your sustainable journey, there's a great book called Transformative Markets, written by this man, Robert Lutke. And he actually ran an algorithm at Georgetown of news articles and social media posts starting in 2018 to the present about markets and about companies creating sustainable goods and services. And then actually ranked all of those using an algorithm on a trust score. And funny enough, we actually ended up being the leaders of trustworthiness above Coca-Cola and Amazon and Google. But what's important is that one of the reasons we scored so high is that we used strong and distinct language in how we talked about our company and our purpose and our outcomes. We have, as we kind of talked about, a lot of partners and collaborators and customers, but also we started appearing a lot in conversation, in social media, in the news, because millennials and Gen Z started talking about it and they care. So I think we have to look at what they want and what they need. And that really is going to drive your top line revenue for sure going forward.
We touched on this the other week, and I was thinking about it more. Your focus is obviously on the fashion space or textiles, et cetera. What other areas do you think your particular technology, what other, is it construction or building materials, or even is it like weirdly materials that go into fine jewelry, or, there's just so many opportunities, it seems like, for growth.
Yeah, you're right. If we think about it, right, textiles touch everyone
Yeah.
World every single day. It is interior design, automotive, aviation, computer electronics. They all touch and use textiles. But you're right. Also, textiles is kind of just the beginning, because every business that has a supply chain has some form of waste. And figuring out what's the most valuable waste, how can we monetize it by selling it today, and how can we minimize it using tools going forward? So yeah, we did a lot of work with New York City government in the New York Circular City Initiative, which is, backed by H&M and Unilever and Cisco and us. And we created a white paper that showed what industries are really important to think about when it comes to circular economy. Textiles is a big one, especially for New York City. But you're right, construction is number two, and demolition waste, and what can we do there? So it's a cool white paper if anyone's looking to read, and it does show how many good jobs can be created and how much money can be saved and made by businesses going circular in the coming years. So a cool blueprint to show, even through the pandemic, the opportunity here for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely ways that sustainability, creates bottom line profit. And this is in all sectors. We've experienced it at Brookfield. We know firsthand that implementing sustainable solutions in our buildings, it makes a huge difference. I want to kind of pivot and talk about something that everyone, it's in the news a lot lately. And some people probably have to go and, Google and figure out what it actually is. But the Queen of Raw at your company, you are creating change by leveraging blockchain technology. So tell us how you're utilizing that data and how it's shifting, like the textile industry space. How do the end users, how do they benefit from this? Let's touch on blockchain.
Yes, let's do that. B word, blockchain. Much like the S word, sustainability, it means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, blockchain technology is the technology that underlies cryptocurrency, but also has application in supply chain. All it means is that there is integrity to the data about your business and your supply chain that you're collecting, and that you can create a report of the history and the movement and the flow of goods through a supply chain that can be verified. That is clean data. That's what it means, right? And so I think it's gotten all of this, focus and attention. But at the end of the day, your business, you don't have to worry about the fact that it's blockchain technology. That's our job. Why do we use it? I think one of the biggest challenges to sustainability that I want to myth bust is that it's not seen as scalable, right? And that big companies can't do it. Everybody thinks about it with pilot projects or capsule collections. And when we started Queen of Raw, we actually started it as just a marketplace and a place where businesses could buy and sell their dead stock textiles. But if you think about it, creating a marketplace to sell waste just kind of slaps a Band-Aid on the problem. You have waste, go sell it and make money on Queen of Raw. How do you actually get to the root of the problem, right? And figure out as a business, why do I have this waste? What is it costing me? And how do I intelligently minimize it going forward? And that's really where we started looking at tools like blockchain and machine learning AI and building the software that we built. Because it is so important that you as an enterprise organization have at your fingertips on your phone, right, the right data. And knowing what this stuff is, where does it come from? Who does it go to? Because then you can actually analyze it and act on it, knowing that you as a business can stand by your actions. And that's the way, I think, to what we talked about earlier, you're going to have the confidence to also be able to communicate the data to your end consumers. Because a lot of you may be starting to do good work, but for so long, we've kept it close to our chests, right? You're afraid of being too bold in the news and sharing something, or getting in trouble with customers or the press if some information was a little bit faulty. But now, thanks to technology like blockchain, you have a report and record and proof to what you speak about. And you can communicate that with your end consumers. And so what's kind of cool, and to touch on what you're talking about with end consumers, with our technology, we go so far as your end consumers can actually scan that QR code in a physical store or digitally online when they go to purchase that product from you, and actually see the beautiful and rich journey and the history of making that product through the supply chain. And we'll show you data down to that exact shirt or jacket or pants, the amount of water, the toxins, the carbon emissions, and the dollars saved. That's really powerful. And an interesting figure, one of our biggest enterprise customers by just starting to talk about their sustainability initiatives and this data and the good work they're doing, they actually saw 3 times the conversion rate in their online direct-to-consumer business just by talking about it. So that is huge numbers you cannot lie with on a top line when you're talking about the future and direct-to-consumer movement. And the one thing I'll end with is that, this extends beyond also just the physical garment. But think about the physical store and space that beautiful product is housed in. That's part of your brand too, and we'll talk about it later, but it can also be a big part of your sustainable journey and how you communicate that all holistically.
Well, and I think consumers, particularly the younger shoppers, they really are looking for this information. I'm thinking, I don't know if Everlane is one of your customers or not, but I'm thinking about how if you log onto their website and you want to go buy a pair of pants, it'll show you can click through and see like the factory where it was manufactured, et cetera. I think they can expand on things like how much water was consumed. That's obviously your more focus on your mission is the water consumption, but it's an interesting space for sure. And it seems like more and more retailers are getting hip to this. I was thinking about also some of the retailers like prior to COVID, many of these brands had, I would say, forward-facing retail online presence, but a lot of back of house didn't connect through exactly in the same way. And so I think what you're talking about is so interesting for them to sort of start future casting along their supply chain.
Yeah, no, it's critical. And especially as you think about the future, right? And, the history is the history and we can analyze it and learn from it. But how do we do predictive analytics right for the future? And a lot of this data was dark data, right? And if we can connect it from the back end to the front end, to all of our suppliers from a tier 1 to a tier 14 supplier, right? Then you can bring to light a lot of this and most importantly, act better tomorrow. And that's what it's about. It's not just about surviving today and what's going on in the world, but truly who's going to dominate in value creation and thrive tomorrow.
Do you have any peers that are like providing similar solutions in this space?
It's interesting. We're hearing, and you probably have heard as well, so many awesome businesses starting to build technologies around these challenges and these problems. And they come out with these incredible solutions that promise, or at least hint and talk about, end-to-end 100% track and trace sustainable supply chain. And don't get me wrong, that is awesome. And any solution and step in the right direction is just that. But when you kind of hear that as a company, I almost worry that you get paralyzed. You think, where do I go and what do I do on day one? Yes, like, Zara and others made commitments. We're going to be 100% sustainable in the next 5 or 10 years. And it's great. Even if you only get 1% of the way there, that still has a massive impact on our world and on your economics. But at the same time, where do you go and what do you do on day one? How do you start this journey? And so that's where we kind of looked at what are the solutions out there and how do we make ours something that you can start at today. And it's kind of funny, when we first started talking to brands and retailers about opportunities today to sell their waste and their dead stock, this was years ago, pre-pandemic, it was seen as a nice to have. And there were great big early adopters in luxury and others who got it, but it was not a have to have. And we'd only talked to the sustainability departments in who are great. They're your brand champions.
Let me interrupt you. Why do you think luxury was first to get there?
Because I think no matter the volume of what they had, whatever they had in waste is so valuable. Right? I mean, every yard of fabric and leather is so beautiful and such a rich history and journey and so costly that they knew that this was, expensive on their bottom line. And you also, as luxury, spend so much time in how they communicate the quality and the story of that product to their end consumers. They knew how important this was on their top line. I think that's something that, fast fashion and others just didn't have at the get-go. And that is why luxury was some of our quickest, earliest adopters who got this, right? And they did have often some of the luxury brands were the first ones with sustainability departments who started keying into that this matters to their big consumers, millennials and Gen Zs as they're growing up and with more purchasing power, they're going to be the ones buying these valuable pieces. So I think that was great, but the challenge is that it can't just be within a sustainability department, right? Bringing about meaningful change. You need the CEOs setting the corporate agenda, the CMOs doing that storytelling, the CFOs who deal with these liabilities, supply chain and procurement, right? And COOs who manage this inventory. So all of these need to be a part of the solution. And so I think that's where we came at it with buying and selling your dead stock is a great place to start today on this sustainability journey. Some of our enterprise customers have actually seen improved up to 15% of their bottom line in just 1 year, just by selling their dead stock. And then, of course, it gives you a top line story to tell. So I think that's where you can start today and then build up and down the chain from there and grow into the supply chain of tomorrow with that digital innovation.
Wow, that's great. I mean, we were going to touch on kind of that connectivity between sustainability and profitability and how many of the brands have this feeling that it's a major deterrent to invest in sustainable practices. But I think you really beautifully illustrated how this is a profitable solution and also how it really has to be holistic throughout the organization. It has to be not just as a capsule collection or a sustainability department. It really needs to be throughout the entire organization.
It does. And the one piece I'll add to that, I know we have talked a lot about it, but, obviously this is myth busting. Sustainability doesn't have to cost you money to participate. And I think you mentioned it. Kering is a great example where you can literally go on their website and see the blueprint and their EP&L reports of how much money they have saved and made and what the blueprint is of how to start to adopt these solutions. And by, for example, selling your dead stock and your waste today, you can take that money and put it back into doing other good acts in your supply chain, right? Without your overall CapEx expenditure increasing. You can pay your workers more. You can buy more innovative, sustainable materials. You can adopt more technology solutions and grow how you digitize up and down the chain. And that is truly, I think, how you can be more efficient and do better tomorrow.
It's so true. I was thinking about back to sort of the sustainability department. The folks at Kering have done an amazing job at this. The chief sustainability officer and head of international institutional affairs at Kering stated recently that it's important to have these discussions within the boutique because it is a way to stimulate conversation within and with other brands. And by that, to them, it really means that they're having this at the designer level as well. And many of these designers and these maisons, sustainability is extremely important to them. And so I think for her to speak to, it also starts within the design department and how they are creating this sustainability model. So one of the things we think about as Brookfield is that we have this bricks and mortar presence. And so what does the store itself communicate to a shopper? So beyond the designs in the store, beyond the brand itself, what is the store physically communicating to a consumer? And one of the things that is so true about luxury, it's like the heart of luxury, is that it creates an emotional experience with the consumer on a very deep level. Otherwise, why would people continue to have such deep brand loyalty, pay a premium, they almost have a relationship with these heritage brands. So the store itself is a way for them to in person and physically communicate these kind of loftier goals of whether it's heritage or quality, craftsmanship, sustainability, all of these pieces that come together and get physically demonstrated in the store. I think that's like a really interesting space for retailers, which is why we believe in, it's proven out throughout even the COVID time period that luxury is experiencing a massive boom and growth, and people still want to really interact with these brands in this way. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think when you think about it, obviously we're talking a lot about the finished garments and the textiles that go into it, but you're 100% right. We go so far as for some of the stuff that a company can't resell because it's past a shelf life or it's truly proprietary. We have a suite of end-of-life partners for responsible solutions of upcycling and downcycling. And I mention that because part of that is, can we turn this into things that can be used in a physical space? Can our recycled textiles be used as beautiful hangers, right? Or bricks and blocks that build up that physical space, or the fabrics and materials that line the walls in these physical shops? And what a cool story and history and journey that adds to too. So it truly is beyond just the garment that's hanging there, right? You're right. It's everything around it. We actually were one of the winners of the We Work Creator Awards, and when we first launched our solution, and a lot of people asked, why WeWork, right? And at the time, WeWork was building a ton of physical locations all over the world. And what they saw about our solution is, how cool would it be if for everywhere we're building, we could actually leverage locally sourced dead stock to build up the physical interior space, right? And tell that story and that journey, both to the person physically sitting in it, as well as the people who come and visit it. And so that's where I think it becomes very interesting and cool to obviously what you're doing as well, and how luxury brands think about that space.
We have a center in that just recently opened in 2019 called the Sono Collection. You may be familiar with it. It's near you. And it's not a luxury center, but it's a new development, new construction. And that project, we ended up integrating sustainable practices all the way from our initial planning stages through construction. We built on a remediated brownfield site. We were able to align our sustainability goals with the contractors. We reduced the use of toxic materials, minimized construction waste. Weirdly and presciently, we prioritized air quality, which was a priority. Thank goodness during COVID, that became such an important topic. We limited light pollution. We enhanced pedestrian access. And then we even had our contractor implementing stormwater pollution prevention plans, and which limit toxins from entering the surrounding water systems. So while brands are adjusting their supply chains, and that's a major force of change for the conservation of natural resources, many brands are also finding great value in store level adjustments as well. We're talking about like actually at the physical store. Are there examples you can think of where brands can implement sustainable practices in store build out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on a number of them, and the fact that you were already doing this and such a leader in this at the volume and scale that you do this, it's going to have a massive impact. And you're right, as you are building out that store, it is thinking about obviously the air you breathe, right? The materials that you're touching in that store, beyond just the garments, the light that comes in and how you're capturing that energy and efficiency. And that actually, it's great because of the storytelling, of course, and the experience that your end consumers will have coming in. But it's also great for the efficiency of it, and efficiently run things save time, money, and resources, right? And I keep coming back to that because I think for so long in the sustainability conversation that has been not quantified or measured or articulated enough in how we communicate it. And so, I went through obviously your report after you shared it with me, and to see how you're measuring and sharing that data and that information for a brand or retailer to not just talk about the products they're selling, but to be able to take that data, build that into how they're talking to their stakeholders, where this matters, their end consumers, where this matters. I mean, that is a game changer for the future. And it's all of these pieces coming together to building these big solutions. So you've been a leader in that space, and it's been so exciting to see and to follow.
Brookfield has been a leader, and thank you for saying that, in the entire commercial building space. We've won many accolades and awards, and it is something that started, probably over a decade ago as a small sustainability department within our organization. Yep. And then it became something that is absolutely a core value of our entire organization, starting with our CEO on down to every single department. We do have to think about all of this as, we're good stewards of the planet. So it is hopefully a more virtuous cycle. I would open up any, conversations that are people want to have with Stephanie. If there's anybody that wants to do any questions to her or me, we're open to that. We've also recorded this and we'll be able to repost it. So any one of you that are watching now, if you want to share it later, you can. I think Stephanie has a YouTube channel that she'll post this on. I don't have a YouTube channel, but I think Brookfield does. They can put it on there. we're certainly open. And while we're waiting on any questions that may happen, I would love to know, you have garnered so many awards. It's unbelievable. I could list them, but you mentioned a few already. Like you were an innovator for LVMH. You received a very a beautiful award through Cartier as a fellow. You won this WeWork Innovator Award, and then of course you've been on absolutely every single fashion publication. You're quoted constantly. I'm guessing that you speaking to the Dalai Lama was sort of a high point among all of these. Is that true? Or
yeah, thank you for the mention of this. Obviously, we can be doing the greatest work in the world, but if we're not communicating it, if we're not sharing it, and if we're not building a common vision and mission that's humanitarian at its core, then what are we doing? So, obviously, the honor and the privilege, something I never expected myself to do, to be on stage interviewing His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it was a really humbling experience. Total transparency, I may not be the most spiritual person, but I am a very big humanitarian. And at our core, I want to be an activist and I do want to change the world. And so having the opportunity to talk to him, my questions were really focused a lot on how he inspires happiness and joy and laughter, and what he thinks the future holds for humanity and how we can all be a part of it. Because I think a lot of time we get kind of into the minutia and the negative, but we have to marry that with a positive, right? And what action can we all take to build that better future? And I think it really came out with him, and it truly was an inspiring experience, a night I'll never forget.
I assume that's on your YouTube channel. If anyone's interested in seeing
it, is indeed. Yep. We've shared it far and wide. Yes.
There's a question for you, which is, have you seen anyone in particular who is making changes in their fabric dyeing process to reduce pollution? Any good examples out there for products, especially like jeans, which use a lot of water?
Oh, yes. Jeans absolutely can be incredibly damaging on it. And there are a number of really cool companies doing things in the jean space. Genealogica is one that comes immediately to mind. They're based, I believe, in Europe. They've won a number of awards. We saw them at the WGSN Awards a few years ago. But they've made incredible strides in how jeans are washed and dyed and treated. There are a lot of new water-based dyes, chemical-free dyes, and new printing processes that are coming out to help reduce that impact. And so many innovations in sustainable fibers, from recycled fibers to new ones made out of waste, like cactus waste, like milk waste, like other food waste, right? So I think we're just at the beginning of seeing these innovations in truly sustainable fibers. The one thing I will mention is that some of them are not big enough yet to be able to do it at scale. And that's where they need more support. They need more of those quote unquote pilot projects and capsule collections from big brands and retailers to buy into this and say, yes, this is the future. This is where we're going to put our dollars. Because I hope at the end of the day, someday, you don't need my marketplace anymore, because we've solved the world's waste and we are truly only using regenerative, innovative, sustainable practices in our supply chain. We got a while to get there, but there are a lot, and I'm happy to share a list of resources after this. So feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Great. This is a similar, I think a nice dovetail off that question. They're asking you, how can emerging brands or digitally native brands implement unique sustainability practices at their inception?
Yeah. So the advantage actually that entrepreneurs and newly created brands have is that they are just that, they're new. And so where big companies do have older school way of doing things and some historical practices and old legacy systems that you have to work with, newer brands are at their inception and at their ideation and creation can do it the way they want to do it and articulate that message right away. So you can be quick and nimble and innovate. The being digitally native direct to consumer is a huge push, obviously, these days. And so being able to communicate that sustainable story matters. Sourcing dead stock and other sustainable materials is a great place to start. And the cool thing about dead stock is you can engage in sustainability, but the stuff is available at a discount. So it doesn't cost you more to use from the get-go, right? And you can build that into your offering as just part of it, as well as working with the new innovative sustainable fibers. And when you're creating as a new designer, think about how much waste am I creating? There's some great zero waste designers out there like Zero Waste Daniel, and they truly helps your bottom line because you have less waste. You're more efficient. And so a ton of great places to start, I think, and communicate that and build that mission and vision into your brand.
I got a question, which is, what role does the store play for Lux partners, specifically in regards to sharing the sustainability message with clients? And I'd love to get your thoughts on it, but I'll give you mine first, which is basically that, that store, the physical store, has to be the embodiment of the experience of that brand. It has to touch all levels, which is why, starting with training, messaging, in-store experience, with their the people who work in the store, they really have to be at a masterclass level to communicate the origin and the specialness of these particular objects or materials that are being sold. And I think that you're seeing that happen at the store level a lot. So I don't know if you've been into a luxury store recently, lately. I was just in Miami looking at many of our projects there. Going in, the knowledge that people working in the stores have is truly exceptional. And they are absolutely talking about, where materials are sourced from, how these are being created. They are absolutely speaking to the sustainability quotient in the store. If it's an incredible, or a leather good, they're speaking to how it's made by hand, why, of course, it, costs as much as it does, and how it's an object that you can have literally for your entire lifetime and potentially pass it down to the next generation. So I think that's actually a very sustainable model. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, in addition to what you do in that physical store, make sure that you capture and animate that to your end consumers, whether, as you said, it is scanning the QR code, even on the wall or the hanger as well, and letting them see the journey and the story and why you chose that and the efficiency of the space. There are also some really cool startups that are taking physical stores for luxury brands and making them in virtual reality repeated, so that the digitally native consumer can look and see in virtual reality that store, and then actually those who want to go can physically go into that store. And you've got that mirrored in a really cool way with that rich history right there embedded. So I think some cool ways to animate and use AR and VR to talk about that physical store space and what it looks and feels, and to replicate it digitally.
I got another question, and it is, it's sort of a quick one, but where have you gotten the most resistance?
Ooh, yeah, No, well, look, we wouldn't be a startup if there wasn't challenges and resistance. And that's why we do what we do, to break, to push through and chip away and to try to lead in a new space. So when we first started, the biggest challenge that people thought we were going to have was that they understood why brands and companies would sell their waste, but would anyone want to buy this stuff? Well, I think in the conversation that we've had just now, you see the value economically as well as in storytelling of buying and using this locally sourced dead stock around the world. But the challenge is, how do you get that supply quickly and easily from a warehouse to the web and to buyers' hands, right? And that is honestly why we built the software that we did. So that we can take the largest companies in the world with thousands of suppliers around the world and get it quickly and easily into the web and into buyers' hands, automated and at scale. And I think that's what we need to keep pushing for, is that this is scalable, it's economically efficient, and that there is value here. The other thing is, of course, in some of this, it is intellectual property for the brands. I do think that's shifting, and what people consider IP around their brands and their designs are changing. Your stuff's already out there, right? So they do. Designers like Mara Hoffman put their stamp on the ground. They sold their stuff on our platform and put their name behind it, because they said, look, anyone can go out on Canal Street and knock it off. I believe in this. But at the same time, we do now have offerings for those end of life, responsible solutions at end of life for anything that is IP. So some of the ways we're thinking about some of the pushback and trying to iterate and improve and grow.
Stephanie, you're amazing. I know why your family always called you Queen. Oh, thank you for being a retail revolutionary. Thank you for sharing your thought leadership with us today. Thank you for your time. I guess that's all we have time for. And I guess would love to just say to everybody who tuned in or is watching this on a recording, thank you for sharing your time with us. And to learn more about our cutting edge approach to reimagining the shopping experience, particularly at our luxury destinations, you can visit us at theiconiccollection.com. Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go change the world.
Let's do it. Talk to you later. Thanks, everyone.